The 12-day war that changed everything, right? Imagine this for a moment. Two nations, sworn enemies for decades, finally clash in what could only be described as the most consequential 12 days in modern Middle Eastern history. Nuclear facilities obliterated, military leaders assassinated, underground bunkers penetrated by the world's most devastating bombs. And all of this happening whilst the world held its breath, wondering if we were witnessing the start of something far more catastrophic. What I'm about to tell you isn't some Hollywood blockbuster script. This actually happened. Between June 13th and June 24th, 2025, the Middle East experienced a conflict that fundamentally altered the balance of power in the region. And the ramifications? Well, they're still unfolding as we speak now. You've probably caught bits and pieces of what has been happening in that part of the world since October 7th, 2023. The headlines have been relentless, haven't they? But what most people don't realize is how all those seemingly separate conflicts, the fighting in Gaza, the clashes with Hezbollah, the Houthi attacks on shipping, were all building towards something much bigger. Something that would force two regional superpowers into direct confrontation for the first time in decades. Let me paint you the picture of how we got here, because understanding the background is absolutely crucial to grasping why these 12 days were so monumentally significant. Picture the Middle East as it stood in late 2023. It was essentially one massive powder keg, with conflicts erupting across multiple fronts simultaneously. You had the devastating war between Israeli forces and Hamas following that October 7th attack. Then there was the escalating violence between Israeli forces and Hezbollah along the northern border. The Yemeni Houthis were launching their own campaign against Israeli interests and international shipping in the Red Sea. And as if that wasn't enough chaos, Syria's civil war suddenly reignited, culminating in a complete rebel victory that nobody saw coming. Now, here's the thing about all these conflicts. They weren't happening in isolation. Behind many of these groups, pulling strings and providing support, was Iran, and standing directly opposite them, defending itself on multiple fronts, was Israel. These two nations had been circling each other like prize fighters for decades, never quite landing the decisive blow. But all these escalating conflicts were pushing them inexorably towards a direct confrontation. To understand why these two countries despise each other so intensely, we need to go back a bit. Believe it or not, Israel and Iran weren't always enemies. Back when the Shah ruled Iran under the Pahlavi dynasty, the two countries actually maintained decent diplomatic relations. But everything changed overnight in 1979, when the Islamic Revolution swept the Shah from power. The new theocratic regime that took control in Tehran had a completely different worldview. Almost immediately, they severed all diplomatic ties with Israel. More than that, they began regularly calling for Israel's complete destruction, referring to it as the Zionist entity rather than acknowledging its right to exist. This wasn't just political posturing. This became a core tenet of Iran's foreign policy. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite this mutual hatred, the two countries were separated by hundreds of miles of other nations' territory. Direct military confrontation seemed unlikely, so both sides began looking for ways to hurt each other indirectly. Iran's approach was to build what they called the Axis of Resistance, a network of proxy groups that they armed, funded, and trained specifically to target Israeli interests. Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and later the Houthis in Yemen. All of these groups received substantial Iranian support. For decades, these proxies have been fighting Israel, creating a constant drain on Israeli resources and forcing them to maintain a massive defense apparatus. Israel, meanwhile, wasn't sitting idle. When Iran's nuclear program was exposed in the early 2000s, Israeli leaders recognized an existential threat in the making. Whilst other world powers tried diplomatic solutions, talks, negotiations, sanctions, Israel opted for a more direct approach. They launched a shadow war against Iran's nuclear ambitions. Remember that computer virus called Stuxnet that mysteriously appeared in Iran's nuclear facilities around 2010? That was a joint Israeli-American operation that caused significant damage to Iran's uranium enrichment capabilities. Then came a series of targeted assassinations. At least 5 Iranian nuclear scientists were killed between 2010 and 2012. Explosions at nuclear facilities, cyber attacks. This was warfare in the shadows, but warfare nonetheless. Now, here's what makes this entire situation so bloody, terrifying. Iran's nuclear program never stopped. In fact, according to the latest reports from the International Atomic Energy Agency, by May 2025, Iran had stockpiled over 400 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%. To put that in perspective, you need roughly 42 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium to potentially build a nuclear weapon. Think about that for a moment. Iran potentially had enough nuclear material for nearly 10 bombs. 10. And this is a regime whose leaders have repeatedly called for Israel to be wiped off the map. The head of the Atomic Energy Agency wasn't mincing words about this. He stated quite clearly that Iran had amassed enough nuclear material for several nuclear weapons and could build them if it chose to do so. American intelligence assessments echoed this sentiment, confirming that Iran had undertaken activities that would put them in a position to rapidly develop nuclear weapons should they decide to cross that line. Iran, for its part, insisted they were only developing peaceful nuclear energy capabilities. But here's the problem with that claim. There is literally no civilian use for uranium enriched to 60%. None whatsoever. The only reason you enrich uranium to that level is if you're planning to take it further, to the 90% enrichment level needed for weapons-grade material. So there you have it. Israel facing the very real possibility of its sworn enemy acquiring nuclear weapons. For any Israeli government, regardless of political stripe, this represented an existential threat that simply couldn't be tolerated. The events following October 7, 2023, only intensified these fears. Iran continued pouring support to Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, forcing Israel to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. The bulk of this support flowed through Syria, where Bashar al-Assad's government served as a crucial Iranian ally. Initially, Israel focused on defeating these proxy forces. They systematically dismantled Hamas through a devastating campaign in Gaza. They decapitated Hezbollah's leadership structure. And when Syrian rebels unexpectedly overthrew Assad's government, Iran suddenly lost one of its most important strategic allies. But by early 2024, the proxy war was evolving into something far more dangerous. Direct confrontation between the principals themselves. The first major escalation came in January 2024, when Israeli forces killed Iranian General Sadiq and several other Iranian officials in a bombing attack in Damascus. This wasn't targeting proxies anymore. This was killing Iranian military personnel directly. Then, on April 1, 2024, Israel took an even more provocative step. They bombed Iran's embassy compound in Syria, killing Mohammed, a senior commander in Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. Attacking an embassy? That's essentially considered an act of war under international law. Iran couldn't let that stand. 2 weeks later, they launched their response, a massive airstrike directly on Israeli territory. We're talking about 170 drones, 30 cruise missiles, and 120 ballistic missiles all launched simultaneously at Israel. This was the first time Iran had ever directly attacked Israeli territory. Now, Israel's air defense systems, supported by American, British, French, and even Jordanian aircraft, managed to shoot down the vast majority of these incoming projectiles. But the significance wasn't in the damage caused, it was in the precedent set. Iran had crossed the line from proxy warfare to direct attack. Israel's response was measured but telling. They targeted Iranian air defense infrastructure near the crucial Natanz nuclear facility and some missile production sites. But they deliberately kept the retaliation limited, clearly not wanting to escalate further at that moment. But the escalation wasn't finished. In July, Israel conducted another targeted assassination, this time taking out Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh whilst he was actually in Tehran. Think about the audacity of that operation. They killed the leader of one of Iran's most important proxy groups whilst he was on Iranian soil under Iranian protection. For Iran, this was utterly humiliating. They couldn't even protect their key allies on their own territory. They vowed immediate retaliation, but it didn't come immediately. They waited until after Israel had also eliminated Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. Then, on October 1st, Iran launched an even larger attack, around 200 ballistic missiles targeting Israeli territory. This time, some of the missiles got through. The Nevatim airbase, which houses Israel's advanced F-35 fighter jets, was hit. The Tel Naf airbase, which reportedly stores Israel's nuclear weapons, was also targeted. Civilian areas were struck as well. The message was clear. Iran's ballistic missile arsenal represented a serious threat that could be easily neutralized by air defenses alone. American intelligence estimated that Iran possessed over 3,000 ballistic missiles as of 2022, and they'd likely produced many more since then. Israel's response came on October 26, 2024, and it was devastating. Israeli F-35 jets struck deep into Iranian territory, targeting the country's missile and drone production infrastructure. But more importantly, they systematically destroyed Iran's air defense capabilities, including 4 advanced Russian S-300 air defense batteries. This attack was strategically brilliant. By crippling Iran's air defenses, Israel was essentially preparing the battlefield for what was to come. They were setting the stage for the conflict that would define the region's future. Now, before we get to the main event, there was one last attempt at diplomacy. The Trump administration, which had taken office in January 2025, made what could only be described as a half-hearted effort to find a peaceful solution. Starting in April 2025, Oman began mediating talks between the United States and Iran. 5 rounds of negotiations were held over 2 months, but honestly, they were doomed from the start. The American position was clear. Iran needed to give up its enriched uranium stockpiles or agree to have them stored in a third country, and they needed to dismantle their enrichment facilities entirely. Iran's position was equally firm. They might consider halting further enrichment in exchange for sanctions relief, but giving up what they'd already produced, not a chance. President Trump wasn't exactly subtle about his intentions either. He publicly warned Iran that failure to agree to American terms would result in Israeli military action. It wasn't a negotiation so much as an ultimatum delivered through diplomatic channels. And then, in the early hours of June 13, 2025, the ultimatum was answered. The Israeli Air Force launched what can only be described as one of the most comprehensive air campaigns in modern military history. Wave after wave of state-of-the-art F-35 stealth fighters swept across Iranian airspace, meeting virtually no resistance. Why no resistance? Because those October 26th airstrikes had already crippled Iran's air defense network. But Israel wasn't taking any chances. According to Israeli intelligence sources, special operations officers had established a hidden drone base near Tehran itself. On the morning of the attack, these drones were used to eliminate whatever air defense assets remained operational. The result was complete Israeli air superiority on day one. Iranian airspace became, essentially, Israeli-controlled airspace. The psychological impact of this cannot be overstated. For a proud nation like Iran, losing control of your own skies represents a fundamental failure of the state's most basic responsibility, defending its territory. The scale of the Israeli attack was breathtaking. Over 100 strategic targets were hit on the first day alone. The Natanz nuclear enrichment facility struck. The Isfahan Nuclear Technology Center destroyed. The underground Fordo nuclear plant bombed. Ballistic missile launchers and depots in Kermanshah-Tabriz, Isfahan, and Tehran obliterated. Military air bases neutralized. But it wasn't just infrastructure that was targeted. Israel went after the human capital behind Iran's military and nuclear programs. On that first day, they killed some of the most senior figures in the Iranian establishment. Hossein Salami, the commander-in-chief of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, dead. Mohammad Bagheri, chief of staff of the Iranian military, eliminated. Top nuclear scientists Faridun Nabasi and Mohammad Deranchi assassinated in targeted strikes. Iran was essentially decapitated on day one. Their command structure, their nuclear program leadership, their military hierarchy, all devastated simultaneously. But Iran couldn't simply absorb this level of attack without responding. Their national pride, their regional credibility, their deterrent capability, everything was on the line. They had to hit back, and hit back hard. The problem was, most of their military capabilities had been destroyed in that first wave of attacks. Their slow-moving Shahed drones were eliminated almost immediately. But they still had their ballistic missile arsenal, the one weapon system that had proven capable of penetrating Israeli defenses. Iranian missiles began raining down on Israeli territory. Tel Aviv was hit, other civilian areas were struck. The sheer volume of missiles launched meant that even Israel's sophisticated air defense systems could intercept everything. When you're facing dozens or hundreds of incoming missiles simultaneously, some are going to get through. For the next 11 days, this deadly exchange continued. Israel maintained complete air superiority, systematically hunting down Iranian missile launchers across the country. But this wasn't easy. Iran had learned from previous conflicts and relied heavily on mobile launchers that could fire and then quickly relocate to avoid detection. It became a cat-and-mouse game played out across Iranian territory. Israeli jets and drones would spot a missile launcher, engage it, claim its destruction. Iranian forces would move another launcher into position, fire their salvo, then disappear before Israeli retaliation could arrive. The most dramatic moment of the war came on June 19th, when Iranian missiles scored their most significant hit. The Soroka Medical Center in Beersheba was completely destroyed. The images of that devastated hospital became symbolic of Iran's ability to strike back despite Israel's overwhelming military advantage. But striking back isn't the same as winning. And Israel continued to hold all the cards in this conflict for 12 straight days. they pounded Iranian strategic sites, critical infrastructure, and military installations with impunity. The question everyone was asking was simple. What were Israel's strategic objectives, and were they achieving them? There seemed to be two main goals. First, regime change. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu openly called on the Iranian people to rise up against the evil and oppressive regime. The thinking was that the shock of the military defeat, combined with the deaths of senior leaders and the obvious inability of the government to protect the country, might spark a popular uprising. This wasn't entirely unrealistic. Iran has faced significant economic pressure for years due to international sanctions. Inflation has been rampant. Youth unemployment is sky. The country has been rocked by several mass protest movements in recent memory. Most notably the 2022 protests following the death of Mahsa Amini in police custody. Moreover, Iran is a multi-ethnic state with large Azerbaijani Kurdish and other minority populations, all of whom have legitimate grievances about political repression and discrimination. With the regime appearing so weakened in those first days of the war, many observers expected to see these fault lines crack open. But it didn't happen. Despite the chaos, despite the military humiliation, despite the deaths of senior leaders, the Iranian people didn't rise up. Perhaps they were too focused on survival during the bombing campaign. Perhaps they feared that any uprising would be crushed once the immediate crisis passed. Or perhaps they simply were unwilling to bet on an uncertain future whilst their country was under active attack. Israel as other bet. Supporting the heir of the former, Pahlavi dynasty, as an alternative to the current regime, proved equally futile. The Shah's family remains deeply unpopular among many Iranians who remember the repression and inequality of the pre-revolution era. So, on the regime change front, Israel failed to achieve its objective. The theocratic government in Tehran remained in power, bloodied but not broken. The second strategic objective was more concrete, destroying Iran's nuclear program. And this is where things get truly fascinating, because Israel's conventional weapons, no matter how advanced, simply couldn't do the job completely. You see, Iran's nuclear program isn't housed in convenient above-ground facilities that can be easily targeted. The most critical components are buried deep underground, specifically designed to survive military attack. The Fordo facility, in particular, is reportedly located 80 to 90 meters beneath the mountains in Qam province. It's protected by layers of reinforced concrete and geological barriers specifically designed to withstand bunker-buster munitions. Israel's most powerful weapons simply couldn't penetrate that deep. Their bunker-busting capabilities top out at maybe 30 to 40 meters of penetration. Against Fordo's defenses, they were essentially useless. Only one country in the world possesses weapons capable of reaching Iran's deepest nuclear FACILITIES. The United States. The American GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator is specifically designed to penetrate 60 to 70 meters of hardened concrete before exploding. But here's the problem. The US has a very limited stockpile of these weapons. Boeing delivered only 20 of them back in 2015, and there's no public information about additional production. Initially, the Trump administration had no intention of joining this conflict directly. One of Trump's key campaign promises had been to keep America out of new wars. His political base was vocally opposed to American involvement in Iran. But Netanyahu is nothing if not persuasive. Behind the scenes, he was lobbying Trump intensively, arguing that a limited American strike on Iran's nuclear facilities could solve the problem once and for all. The success of Israel's bombing campaign, the complete dominance of Iranian airspace, the obvious weakness of Iranian defenses. All of this probably made Trump's decision easier. On the night of June 22nd, Operation Midnight Hammer commenced. The Americans began with deception. B-2 stealth bombers were sent towards Guam, creating the illusion that no American attack was imminent. Meanwhile, F-22 and F-35 fighters were already approaching Iranian airspace, scanning for any remaining air defense threats. Then came the main event. 7 B-2 bombers, carrying the most destructive conventional weapons in the American arsenal. They dropped 12 bunker-buster bombs on the Fordo facility and 2 more on an American submarine, simultaneously fired 2-4-3-0 Tomahawk cruise missiles at various nuclear-related targets. According to General Don Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, over 125 aircraft participated in this single operation, including intelligence gathering and refueling planes. It was one of the most complex military operations in recent American history. The attack on Fordo was particularly devastating. The first bomb penetrated the concrete barriers, protecting the facility's ventilation shafts. The remaining bombs were then dropped directly through these openings, exploding deep within the underground complex. Not a single American aircraft was lost in the operation. It was a masterclass in precision warfare. But what was the actual damage? This is where accounts diverge significantly. President Trump claimed that Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities had been completely and totally obliterated. General Kane stated that Iran's nuclear infrastructure was severely damaged. However, leaked reports from the Pentagon suggested a more modest assessment, that the operation had set back Iran's nuclear program by only a few months. This discrepancy highlights one of the central challenges in assessing this conflict's ultimate impact. Iran's immediate retaliation was swift but ineffective. They launched missiles at the American Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, but all were intercepted by air defenses. It was a symbolic gesture more than a serious military response. On June 24th, just 12 days after it began, the United States brokered a ceasefire between the warring parties. So what can we conclude from these extraordinary 12 days? From a purely military standpoint, Israel's superiority was overwhelming. They achieved complete air dominance, systematically destroyed Iran's military infrastructure, eliminated key personnel, and did all of this whilst suffering relatively minimal losses themselves. Iran's primary deterrent, their massive ballistic missile arsenal, proved partially effective, but ultimately insufficient. Yes, some missiles got through Israeli defenses and caused significant damage, particularly to civilian areas. The destruction of the Soroka Medical Center demonstrated that Iran could still inflict pain even whilst losing the broader conflict. But Iran's broader strategic position was fundamentally weakened. Their air defenses were obliterated. Their missile production capabilities were severely damaged. Key military leaders were dead. Their nuclear facilities were bombed by the world's most powerful military. From Israel's perspective, they achieved 1.5 of their 2 main objectives. They failed to trigger regime change in Iran. The theocratic government survived, albeit in a weakened state, but they did inflict massive damage on Iran's nuclear program, particularly with American assistance. The question that remains, and this is absolutely crucial for understanding what comes next, is whether Iran's nuclear capabilities were truly eliminated or merely set back. The Americans and Israelis insist that the nuclear facilities were so severely damaged that it would take years to rebuild them. But there are persistent rumors about secret nuclear facilities that weren't targeted. and questions about whether Iran managed to relocate their enriched uranium stockpiles before the bombing began. If Iran did preserve their nuclear materials and retains hidden facilities, they could potentially restore their nuclear program within a few years, rather than decades. If they didn't, if everything was truly destroyed, then Israel and America achieved a strategic victory that will reshape the Middle East for generations. We simply don't know yet. Intelligence assessments remain classified. Satellite imagery can show destroyed buildings but and reveal what was inside them, or whether crucial materials were moved beforehand. What we do know is that these 12 days fundamentally altered the balance of power in the Middle East. Iran's military capabilities were devastated. Their regional influence was diminished. Their nuclear program was set back by months or years, depending on whose assessment you believe. Israel demonstrated that they possessed both the capability and the willingness to strike anywhere in the region with devastating effect. The shadow war that had been ongoing for decades erupted into open conflict, and Israel emerged as the clear victor. But victories in the Middle East are rarely permanent. Iran is a proud civilization with thousands of years of history. They've survived invasions, revolutions, and international sanctions. The question is, and whether they allow rebuild. It is how long it will take, and what they allow do when they re-ready. For now, the region enjoys an uneasy calm. But if history has taught us anything about the Middle East, it's that today's victory can become tomorrow's provocation. The fundamental issues that drove this conflict: Iranian ambitions, Israeli security concerns, nuclear proliferation, religious and ethnic divisions. None of these have been resolved. What we've witnessed might be the end of one chapter in the Iran-Israel conflict, but it's almost certainly not the end of the story. The question isn't whether there will be future confrontations, but when they'll occur and what form they'll take. And that, perhaps, is the most sobering conclusion of all. These 12 days that shook the Middle East might not be remembered as the war that ended all wars in the region, but as the war that set the stage for whatever comes next. The stakes couldn't be higher, the players couldn't be more determined, and the weapons couldn't be more devastating. In a region where ancient grudges meet modern warfare, where religious conviction meets geopolitical ambition, where the threat of nuclear weapons looms over every calculation, we can only hope that wisdom will prevail over vengeance in whatever chapters are yet to be written. But hope, as they say, is not a strategy. And in the Middle East, the only certainty is uncertainty itself. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!